This week we have a tale of betrayal, wealth, power, lust and sex. In which case, this video should do well. We're looking at the story of how, around about 30 years after the Romans first landed in Britain, they obtained total control over the part of the country that had been ruled by the largest confederation of Iron Age tribes, the Brigantes. And our tale includes a Celtic queen of the Brigantes. Let's assume she was beautiful for dramatic effect. And she took a very different approach to the Roman occupation of Britain than Queen Boudica down south. And ultimately, we're looking at how that Queen Cartimandua, came unstuck. And the setting for our tale this week are two very different tribal capitals of the Brigantes, that once mighty tribe that ruled northern England, what we now call northern England, until the Romans had different ideas. This is Stanwick, a massive and complex, unfinished Iron Age site with huge ditches and massive embankments here. It's calculated that it covers an area around about 270 hectares.
The work had never been finished. It was stopped in the middle. The great entrance at the south, which I thought might produce more swords and more relics, was found never to have been used. The rocks were lying loose, the great rocks which they chiselled away in making their rock-cut ditch there, were still lying loose where the builders had left them.
So much more than your everyday common or garden lowland Iron Age hill fort. Unbelievably, back in 1951, when Great Britain was in as much debt as it is today, and boy is that saying something, that hero for historians and archaeologists, Sir Mortimer Wheeler, was offered an unlimited budget by the UK government to carry out the first ever excavations here at these earthworks at Stanwick and the surrounding area. It was all part of the Festival of Britain, and for those of you that remember it, that's a bit like the Millennium Dome, all of that sort of stuff, but good. Wheeler was the premier archaeologist of his day and the first to popularise the subject, even bringing it to television. And if you're getting impatient for the sort of tawdry stuff that was promised in the introduction, then please stick with us because Sir Mortimer Wheeler delivers that in spades. Considered the father of modern archaeology, Sir Mortimer Wheeler brought a discipline and scientific rigour that had previously been unknown. During World War II, for instance, he saved antiquities in places like Libya from the wrecking antics of the boisterous soldiers. But it has to be said, he was a bit of a cad. Married 3 times, nothing wrong with that in itself, happened to the best of us, but he had countless affairs and one-night stands with young ladies who thought that they were there to do some digging. Selling fake slingshots when he needed a bit of extra cash, cheating on television quiz shows, and quite a bit of bullying. We don't want to get cancelled, so clearly we do not support that sort of thing, but it has to be said that his contribution to archaeology was immense, and while some modern experts scoff at his assumptions today, his body of work remains significant and important, such as that here at Stanwick. When Morty was given this unbelievable unlimited budget to choose a site for excavation of his choice as part of the Festival of Britain, he selected Stanwick based upon a conversation that he'd had with a friend some 40 years previously. And he told Magnus Magnusson that in a fascinating television interview that he did, I think sometime in the early 70s. I guess all of our demographic are going to remember Magnus. Nowadays, of course, it is trendy to mock Sir Mortimer Wheeler and challenge his assumptions, but he discovered loads of stuff. Now, here at Stanwick, he concluded that it was a defensive structure against the Romans, and he even worked out that they had a 5-meter high stone wall lining these ramparts, and he reconstructed a part of that with recovered stone here. You can see how industrious Morty and his team were. They dug the ditch right the way down there, and you can see the Iron Age work to cut through the bedrock. Naughty Morty's conclusion about Stanwick was that the site was only in use for one generation, roughly spanning from around the sort of AD 43 when the Romans arrived down south through to AD 70. He found a unique wooden-sheathed Iron Age sword at one of the gateways to the Stanwick fortifications, and there was also a decapitated head there as well, suggesting someone had been on display for being a little bit naughty. And he talks about this in the interview with Mag, as he preferred to call Magnus Magnusson. Guess that's understandable. It's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? Magnus Magnusson.
And you can almost hear the Ninth Legion tramping up the road when you look at this unfinished entrance, with the rocks still standing there as the builders had left them.
Just pulled over at the side of the road. The thing about this site, as massive as it is, access to it is extremely limited, but hopefully you can see a bit more of it there behind me. Quite a useful section, this, because you can see the vestigial ditch there. Shows how much Morty dug out where he erected Wheeler's Wall. I'm determined to show you a bit more of the fortifications because they are amazing. Frustrating that the access is so limited. And it's turned out to be a right sizzler today, which is a bit surprising in this summer that we're not having this year. I do hope it's as good when we get to the second Celtic tribal centre for the Brigantes. I would have no idea what the weather's going to be like there because I haven't filmed it already. Now I'm hoping this footpath, one of very few here, is going to get us to another stretch. I am a law-abiding antiquarian. Now as I walk along here, I think I'm on a vestigial bit of the earth ramparts that has been destroyed, but it's looking a bit more promising up ahead. Yeah, look at that. But we are disbarred. It's so annoying for antiquarians when you can't get to the antiquities because of that pesky old thing called the law. Since Sir Mortimer Wheeler's day, we have learnt that Stanwick camp existed a long time before this sort of one generation idea that he had. Work in the 80s and 90s has shown that the area around the Toffs actually dates back to something like about 80 BC. We know, for instance, that huge ramparts were thrown up in the period sort of 10 to 20 BC. Or is that 20 to 10 BC? Anyhow, in 10 BC, around about then, they threw up a large circular timber structure which was very similar to the Irish royal palaces such as Navan. But I think the most interesting thing about the finds pre the Roman conquest is an array of extremely valuable, expensive Roman goods. So that's before 43 AD, possibly suggesting some diplomacy was going on as the Romans prepared to conquer Britain, getting the house of the Brigantes on side with some buy-offs seemed like a pretty good tactic. I have some company, as well as the cows. There are flies everywhere as well today on this one hot day of the summer. Sorry about the flies on the lens here, guys, but the simple truth is that there is no other site like Stanwick in northern England in terms of its size and its complexity. It is similar to the Iron Age sites at Colchester and St Albans down south. Time to deliver on the lurid promise of the intro and ensure this video gets good retention. The Brigantes were the largest tribe in the country, with a territory extending coast to coast. At the time of the Roman conquest, their queen was Cartimandua. She quickly became a Roman client, her mouth stuffed with gold, no doubt. But hey, I hear you screaming at your devices. Wheeler said Stanwick was defensive. In AD 51, Caratacus...
It's correct. Caratacus to the vulgar. But Caratacus, after all, if you can say Boudica, I can say Caratacus.
Leader of the Catavellauni sought refuge with Cartimandua. He wasn't so keen on the Romans himself. She dobbed him in, possibly explaining the extremely valuable Roman finds here at Stanwick. Wheeler has Cartimandua as from a southern royal lineage, married off to Venutius. Not too sure what his evidence for that is.
And she couldn't stand this hairy
Husband.
Husband is yes, or this hairy husband. This what should I say? Pastoral shepherd. This great shepherd in the north.
AD 57, she dumps Venutius and replaces him with one of his soldiers, Caratacus. Nothing ever changes with the male psyche. Venutius goes ape, going to war with her and her Roman overlords. She held members of his family hostage, and the Romans came to her assistance and saw him off. She then held the throne through the rest of the 50s and 60s until Venutius tried again in AD 69. This time, help from Rome was limited. They were having their equivalent of Johnson Truss Sunak at the time, the year of the 4 emperors. Venutius seized control, and Cartimandua was spirited away by the Romans. Tacitus doesn't tell us the fate of Cartimandua, and whilst he acknowledges her royal lineage and loyalty to the Romans, he focuses on her treachery, lust, self-indulgence, sexual impropriety, and cunning.
Became pro-Roman. She was a Quisling.
And with those impressive stone ramparts that we've looked at and talked about, it is a very likely candidate for having been the royal house of the Brigantes for Cartimandua and Venutius. And there's every reason to believe that Venutius did come back here in AD 69 to make it the base for his defences against the Romans, who he was now opposing. Although those stone ramparts were useless, they were probably for prestige, just for show in reality. I'm sure those cows are not going to cause any problem with the upcoming special effect. We're going to leave Venutius here at Stanwick in AD 69 for the moment, and we're going to pop off and have a look at another site. Weather seems to be taking a turn for the worst at our next location. That might provide some continuity when we get to the second Brigantian capital. Not that I know, not that I've filmed that already. I've come back to Piercebridge, where we were a few weeks ago, looking at that Roman town of Morbium. This is not Doctor Who. Now, looking at the map, I noticed something next to the current bridge. It's this footpath. Now, we do know that there was Iron Age activity at Piercebridge before the Romans came along. And I want to have a look at this. It's got an interesting alignment. Basically, I think this might be the Iron Age trackway that linked this settlement, or river crossing, or whatever it was the Brigantes were doing here, with the fortifications at Stanwick. Steep banks don't necessarily make an Iron Age trackway, but have a look at this overlay that I prepared earlier. So, what do you make of that? There's a good alignment if this was a track heading off to the fortifications at Stanwick. When you come out, it gets a bit lost in the woods there, but when you come out this side, you won't be able to see, but there is a sort of an indentation there. I'm going to go up and have a look a bit further up. I use this umbrella that suddenly appeared through the teleportation magic to show you. There's quite a significant raised bank there, and I'll come over that so you can sort of see it dipping down, and then it rises up there as well. Obviously, that doesn't mean it's Iron Age, but it does suggest some antiquity. Oh no, I'm almost getting sort of Aga vibes from it now. Perhaps the Romans put it in. But it's something, isn't it? And that's what antiquarians find, some things. As you come down the other side of the hill, it takes on very much an Aga type profile. I think that's possibly scotched my theory that I'd found an unidentified Iron Age trackway linking these two settlements. It does look a bit more like a Roman road, but that doesn't make any sense either, because Morty was right. He might have got the earlier bit wrong, but he was right. And Stanwick dropped out of use around about AD 70, so there's no reason really for the Romans to build a road linking their thriving town of Morbium to a now abandoned Iron Age camp. Back to our narrative then. It's around about AD 70 and Venutius is now resisting the Romans, but he's leaving Stanwick. Now we know that the Brigantes had a second capital, and that's where we're going to go to now. Need to just check the continuity. I'm sure this is all going to be fine. So I'm going to teleport over there now, and we'll have a look where the Brigantes went next. Wait! Oh, bugger! Hang on a minute. Roman walls. What is this? Roman walls. We're meant to be in the Celtic capital of the Brigantes. Roman. A classic Roman corner turret. Roman altars. Roman garden projects. The remains of a Roman townhouse, and it's oblique to the town walls. But hey, that's a story for another day. I've got a bit distracted by that. So the mound here is the town wall, and then these earthworks that you can see over here are quite a grand Roman townhouse, but it's at the wrong angle to the wall, suggesting it was there before the wall was put round the town. Looks like a Roman town wall and a Roman townhouse in the Brigantes' new capital. Look at this, Roman columns and plinths, Roman stonework everywhere, no sign of the Celtic Brigantes. You get the general idea. Roman stuff everywhere. But anyhow, that teleport seems to have changed my clothes from earlier today, which is handy. Charming Victorian buildings housing mosaics. In situ. Blooming good ones too. Right, there's a clue as to what's going on here in this supposed Celtic Brigantes capital in the modern day name. It's called Aldborough, borough, that classic Saxon giveaway of Roman remains. So around about the time we're talking about, AD 70, this was just a small Roman trading settlement. It became a planned Roman town in around about 120 AD, and the Romans called it Isurium Brigantum. So they're flattering the Brigantes into thinking that they're somehow still in charge. Nowadays, the Roman town at Aldborough is manned by English heritage, and the lady at reception did look at me a bit suspiciously, as if she'd seen me on some sort of internal memo, but so far I've been okay, and I've been unaccosted. Mercury in the church. Churches are literally a godsend for YouTubers when it's raining. I've come down to the centre of the town of Aldborough, and the church sits on the site of the Roman Forum. It was getting a bit oppressive on that English heritage site, so I thought I'd escape from a bit. I tried the pub, but there were people. I did pick up 3 subscribers in there, so that's good news, and thanks, guys. So we have seen that the town here, Isurium Brigantum, was very much a Roman town, a trading centre around about the AD 70 period that we're talking about with Venutius, but becoming a planned town around about 120 AD, and that lasted right the way through to the end of the Roman period and beyond. It is a town of continuity. There's been people living here ever since the Romans withdrew their troops. At some stage between AD 70 and AD 74, Quintus Batilus Cerealis was sent over to deal with Venutius, and he disappears from the record from about AD 74. Now, the English heritage lady at the reception there, whilst being a little bit wary of me, did share her theory. She thinks Venutius escaped somewhere up north. That fits with this idea that I love, that later on, when they built Hadrian's Wall around about 122 AD, it was as much about keeping the conquered Britons in. There are indications in the records, the Roman records, that there were some ongoing problems with the Brigantes after the disappearance of Venutius. They were even cited as one of the possible causes of the legendary disappearance of the 9th Legion. And there are indications that there was some form of Brigantian revolt in the early days of Hadrian's reign. But by the time we get to sort of 142 AD, the Brigantes disappear from the Roman record. So this town of Isurium Brigantum is very much a token gesture. The Romans were in control, and they remained in control for the remainder of their time here, and the town carried on after that as well, right up to the current day. So that is the story of how the Romans finally conquered the Brigantes and took control of the northern part of what we now call England. And the Brigantes faded into history, never to be heard of again. Can you hear something? She's dobbed me in. You can probably guess how this is going to end. They really mean it when they say no filming. Not now, Philip. That's actually a really good point, but I'm just surprised Philip's watching the Roman crap. He says he hates it, but yes, teleport, that's the way out of this. Until next week, you know what to do. I don't know why that just happened, but it seems like a great way to end. See you next week.